Hey everybody, and welcome to the Worldwide Workshop. My name is Matthew, and with me as always is Justin.
This is a masterclass for early childhood educators.
A conversation about developing your excellence.
Each week we will share our perspectives, experiences, and mistakes on our journey toward better practice.
So sit down and listen up.
Hi, today we're going to be discussing documentation. Matthew, what is documentation?
I'm so glad you asked. So documentation is kind of the capturing of children's learning in a way that makes it actionable. So things like pictures are really great. Writing down the children's words is really great, but also even just writing down kind of a synopsis of what happened. You know, just like the children started with this and went on with that, and then adding kind of your thoughts and feelings and questions and perspectives in the middle. And it's kind of the way in emergent curriculum anyway that it validates the children's learning. I don't know if validate is the right word.
Empowering?
Empowering? No, not empowering. It's like...
Acknowledging?
No, it's not acknowledging. It's about evaluating. A lot of curriculums are evaluative. So they write down tests and see what you know and what you don't know, what you got from the lesson, and you can see how to improve your teaching. Well, documentation isn't evaluative, but it helps you understand the value in their learning. So a little bit, I guess. Anyway, what do you think about documentation?
Well, just to go off of what you're saying, I think there's a couple ways that we can look at documentation, and what the purpose of it is usually that intent of why you're documenting. And so when you're thinking of the evaluative aspect, from that angle, you can write documentation for yourself that is where you can look back on it and maybe you might ask questions of yourself and you might go back to the children. But also when children can see that visibility of like even just the photo, they can also begin to process it and then maybe ask questions, and that could lead into more discussions.
Right. But it's not always for the children.
No, it's not always for the children, but you got to know your audience and why you're doing what your intent is, like you said.
Well, that's what you said. I didn't say that.
I said it.
Yeah, I find that, I mean, when you're beginning documentation or when you're stuck in your routines of documenting, it's good to just exercise that muscle. Try different things out. Take the pictures, then tomorrow take better pictures. Yeah. Write down the words, then tomorrow record the words and then write them down. Yeah.
I find that also, for me, documentation is a responsive thing, where it really depends on a situation or it depends on my mood, but I look at it as an art form, and I don't know if that's because I'm an artist myself, but when I take a photo, it's a capturing of a moment in time that resonates with me, and that's why I was drawn to it. And somebody else might look at it and think of something completely different, like, why did you take that photo?
Right, whereas I'm not an artist, and I don't think that way. I think of it, I guess, some people might say it's an artist, but I think of it as kind of like a documenter or a TV director. Like I'm setting up the show so that everybody can see it. You know what I mean? I guess that's an art to some people.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly it's an art to some people, but I don't see it as an art to myself. I see it as kind of like an aspect of my job to convey that message. Anywho, what else? Oh no, there was something you were going to talk about.
Oh, what was that?
It was about the idea of documentation meeting a standard or an aesthetic.
Oh, yes. So the first thing that I would say is documentation was new to me when I joined a center.
Peter Green Hall Children's Center, let's be real.
And they had an aesthetic of the way that documentation would look. And there was a formula.
Okay, so the classroom that he went into had an aesthetic.
Yeah.
Not the whole center. It was senior preschool at the time. Thanks, Bobby and Annette.
And personally, I was not taught this way of capturing children's voices. And so when I went there, to me, aesthetically, it was very pleasing. And I liked that it was a consistent font. It had a title. It had a formula of pictures and quotes and things like that. So it was something that visually I was drawn to, and I had this like emotional connection to it. Like it was, again, back to that art form where it was, I was able to connect to it and enjoy creating this document.
I did not have that experience. When I started doing documentation, it was because I had to do documentation. We had to write in these binders everything that we did throughout the day.
Right.
It started out as pre-planning and then was more like write it, fill it out as the day went on. And it wasn't until I started working, I was working with Bobby and Annette at the time, but Carol Ann Ween came in to mentor us for a couple of weeks. I was actually going through a really rough time at the time. I thought that our director hated me and wanted nothing to do with me. I thought I was in trouble. Carol Ann came in and just said, hey, what are the children doing and how can you show me? And that was basically, that's the way I heard it. She didn't say those exact words, but that's what I heard. So then, after getting out of my negative headspace, I would explain to her what the kids were doing. And then the next week I'd have something to show her. And I'd make sure I had something to show her because Carol Ann Ween was showing up to my classroom to ask me about this.
Yeah.
I was not about to waste her time coming in, or my time or my opportunities. So I would document it, and it ended up turning into kind of a project where we were exploring map making with the children. First around the classroom, then around the center, and then around the city. So it was kind of a real growth in perspective for the children, but a real development of documenting for me. And then I had to present it. I didn't have to present it. I was able to present it to a group of my peers at a conference that had, 50 to 100 people there. So it was kind of this other level of documenting. I was no longer documenting for my classroom wall. Like every comma had to be in the right spot, and every bit of the documentation had to be right for the presentation. And then I had to learn how to present, which was cringy at first.
But you did great.
I did great. That's another story. Anyway.
So I don't know if this falls into this first conversation, but with documentation, some people would find it intimidating, especially when they see a center who created an aesthetic and is pushing it out there into the community. So when someone's new or when someone's looking at it, they're feeling overwhelmed by a standard that maybe came from themselves.
Yeah, like a pressure they're putting on themselves based on somebody else's excellence. Yeah. So this kind of goes back to the first thing that we were talking about in the Stuck episode about if you don't see it, you've got to be it. And Peter Green Hall was doing that at the time. They were leaders in Reggio-inspired practice and emergent curriculum early on, and they decided to do the presenting of it and the documentation and put that out there. Then everybody saw them as the experts and tried to meet their standards or be intimidated by their standards, when really it wasn't about a standard so much as a style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And often we hear people say, start with a photo, but there's so much that goes beyond that, because then you're putting yourself out there. Like if you're sending a text or an email, it then goes out into the world and then people have to see it. So then that social media aspect comes in. So that fear of putting that photo out there means like...
I was so lucky actually, because when we started, we didn't have social media.
No, that's right.
We started in the early 2000s and there was no Instagram. There was a little bit of YouTube, but it was really only like the evolution of dance and Charlie Bit Me. Like there was nothing else. So we didn't have all these pressures that people have now.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll have more after the break. See you soon.
Hey, are you looking to do home improvements?
Yeah, but anyone I call doesn't show up, or the work they do just isn't great.
Well, you should try Perfect Tile and Flooring. Just ask for Moon. He can install bathrooms, kitchens, and a whole lot more.
Really? Have you seen his work though?
My bathroom felt like an indoor outhouse, cracked tiles, stained tub, and holes to the outside world. Moon, from Perfect Tile and Flooring, came in and worked his magic. Our disaster bathroom was transformed into a relaxing oasis.
Really? He sounds great. How can I get a hold of him?
You can go to his Facebook page at Perfect Tile and Flooring. He is fully insured and accredited by the Better Business Bureau.
Wow, thanks, Justin.
Hi, we're back.
Yay.
Matthew,
Yes.
are there any more examples about documentation you want to share?
I would love to. So just hitting on the topic we were talking about just before the break, Justin was saying, don't be intimidated by trying to meet an aesthetic. And a mentor of mine, Christine McLean, who was my thesis advisor in my master's, yay Christine McLean, when she was doing her dissertation for her PhD, she used kind of a format for documenting that made it more dependable. I don't know if dependable is the right word. Simplified for researchable results, I guess is the best way for me to say it. She would say it much better. She did a dissertation on it and a PhD. But what she did was she told the educators that she was working with and interviewing, take a picture of a child in process, working, creating, thinking, whatever, and then print off the picture, take it to the child, and ask them 3 questions. And I don't remember exactly what the 3 questions were, but they were approximately, ask the child, what are you doing in this picture? And then the child would say the words and they'd fill out that line or 2 lines of information. And the next question was, how did you know about that? Or how did you know how to do that? And then they'd fill out the child's things. And then the 3rd question was something along the lines of, would you do it again, or what would you do next time? Maybe. I'm not too sure about that 3rd question. But anyway, and then they'd fill it out. And what it did was give this kind of template to documenting that made it possible and attainable and took away that intimidation. Mm-hmm. I just need to have a picture and all the thoughts and ideas, and like nobody can criticize a child's own belief system, and I don't even have to come up with the questions. So if I just do that, I'm getting the snapshot and I'm getting the child's voice in there. And I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was so perfect. I wanted her to write it up as kind of like a how-to article for documentation, just a 2-pager. And it would just be so helpful to so many educators who get bogged down by what to do with documentation.
Well, and also it goes back to our first conversation, being stuck. Often people are stuck in maybe the fear of documenting. So then being able to just get that photo out there, that's why people kind of say, just take a photo.
Yeah, actually my Bobby and Annette, they called themselves perfectionists, right? And then they just wouldn't do the stuff because they couldn't get it perfect. Or they wouldn't complete the stuff because they couldn't get it perfect. And I was like, is that a perfectionist? I don't know. But the stuff that they did turn out was pretty amazing. And I learned so much from working with them. But yeah, get past that. Just throw that away. Throw that ego away.
Because really it's all about your time with the children and how are you going to represent that time. And digging deeper is by starting with that photograph to start a conversation.
Speaking of digging deeper, do you have any documentation examples that you could share about digging deeper and going beyond kind of the trains or dinosaurs?
Well, yes. So one example was probably my first documentation experience. Mm-hmm. And Bobby, again, she was in the room and we heard the children talking about God and running around the room, and I was curious about that, and I would approach her at the lockers and she would just look at me, she would put her hand on my shoulder and she said, it's now you, like you're in. And I was like, what does that mean? And it was the pressure of thinking, oh my gosh, it's my first job at Peter Greenhalgh Children's Center. It was my first time doing documentation. And now they're talking about God. And is this what we're starting with?
Yeah, and that can be really intimidating because, parents do not want you to talk to their kids about God,
Yeah.
And people do not want to connect that to education, the idea of religion and education. But it wasn't exactly religion.
No. And so it started off with the question, it's what are they really talking about? Where is this coming from? And so I had to actually listen to the way that they were talking, listen to the way that they were playing, observing all of that. And then when I thought about something that confused me, I would go back to them and ask them that question. So my question was, who is God? And that kind of started the whole conversation where they would talk about it. And
it seemed like you were researching the children's thinking.
Yeah, and I didn't know it at the time.
Right.
I was in the moment doing all this stuff and writing, what is the word? Furiously?
Furiously.
And so I was documenting that, and then people would hear that I was talking about God with the children, so then they started to bring in books. But the concept of it, to me, wasn't about getting books about God and different religions, because that's not what the children were kind of saying. Like, that's not what they were saying, and I couldn't understand what they were saying yet. So that's why I kept writing it out.
And that happens so often with people. You think the interest is trains. It has nothing to do with trains. Trains are just the toy that's out while they're exploring physics. They want to see how high, how fast it can move. Yeah. They didn't really want to know about God.
No.
They were developing a theory of, I mean, I don't know, it wasn't my documentation, but they were developing a theory.
Yes.
They weren't researching religion.
No, but it did come up because we had different religions in the group, and they were able to use their lived experiences to talk about that. But then it informed their play, and then it turned out that God was a superhero. And that's the direction in which we started to develop. And then parents would come to me and say, I don't want you to talk to my children about God. If they're going to learn about it, I'm going to be the one to teach them that. And I said, okay, why did they feel that's what I was talking about? So then I had them read our documentation, and I also invited them to participate in the discussion, to realize that I wasn't putting my views on what religion was. It was more of where the children were coming from, and I was just relaying that information through to the typed words.
And to keep on topic, it was the documentation that makes it clear.
Yes.
Because you can say whatever you want in the moment, but when you read what children are saying line by line, my God is a superhero. Well, my God is a woman. Well, my God can run faster than your God. Well, you know what? I mean, if you actually believe in your religion, you're not talking about my God versus your God in comparisons. So that's not really what was going on.
Yeah, and through that documentation, parents actually suggested more involvement. They wanted to come in and learn about other religions. And so one parent actually said, I want to go to a synagogue because I've never been there. And based on what the children were reading, what the adults were reading, they started suggesting it to the children. And so the children were able to reference the material that they just talked about.
Yeah. And how were you feeling at the time about tackling such a, taboo topic? Tackling a taboo topic.
So it is one of those difficult topics that it seemed that it was the culture of Peter Green Hall that no topic was taboo.
No topic is taboo to
tackle. And we just started talking about it, and I was uncomfortable with documenting and talking to families, but because it was so authentic and I was just copying word for word what the children were saying, it removed my ego biases, whatever you want to say, and it just focused on the children and what they were thinking about. And it was through all of their conversations that they identified God as a superhero.
And there you go. God is a superhero. All right, we're going to go to a quick little break, and we'll be back in a few seconds. See ya.
Hey, are you looking for an ad space to promote your personal business? Just send us an email at justinwestart@gmail.com for your own audio ad and shout out in our next YouTube video. We can include logos, photos, and other contact information for your business. Thanks and enjoy the rest of the video.
So we're saving it for the camera. Okay. All right, and we're back. So now I just wanted to talk about a couple of mistakes I made in my documentation, or one big mistake that I made in my documentation. I cited it in my thesis for my master's, and it's something that really kind of changed the way I worked with children immediately. What is that? Oh, that's my thesis.
Early
Not that
childhood educators shifting in their understanding of emergent curriculum. It's about transforming thought by Matthew Sampson.
You can Google me, MSVU, thanks. Anyway, the point is, I was working with a kid in a school age program, as I did for a lot of my career. It was some of the best teaching I've ever done. And I had this child come to me with a drawing about, there was a drawing with somebody with a bag of money and standing like next to somebody else on the road, and that person had a knife. And then when you flipped over the page on the backside, the person who previously had the money had now blood splotches in the kidney area, and the other person had the bag of money and the knife with blood on it. And I was like, oh my God, and this is terrible. Why are the children, I was like, this is a drug deal. Why are the children drawing pictures of drug deals in the classroom? And basically what I did was I stopped and questioned that child, interrogated really that child about like, what do you think you're doing? I didn't say that. I said, what are you drawing? And he said, and I said, well, if you're not going to talk about it in here, you can't draw it in here. And it was just such a cringe moment for me.
When you reflect on that now.
No, even at the time, shortly, like minutes out of that moment, I was like, oh, why did I say that to him? Why do I care? Why can he not draw this? What is wrong with me? And then a couple weeks or months later, I put on the art table kind of one of those mannequins. Here's a broken version of it, but here's a real version of it. One of these on the middle of the table, just like that, for the kids, like as a focus for if they wanted to draw something, they could use the mannequin. Is this called a mannequin?
Sure.
Sure, it's a mannequin. We'll go with it. So I put that on the table, and the boy sat down to draw. We'll call him Justin. So Justin sat at the table to draw the mannequin, and he drew a picture of Spider-Man. And he drew lots of cartoon characters and comic book characters and stuff like that. So he's like, look, Matthew, I drew a picture of the mannequin with the Spider-Man costume on. I'm like, yeah, of course, Justin. Of course you did. That's exactly what you did. Yeah, okay, get it in my face. I didn't say get it in my face, but my attitude was definitely like, you did not do that. I'm so happy that you're drawing. You don't need to try to impress me by saying you drew this thing. I don't care what you're drawing. Anyway, and then, the day went on, and I was supportive of my language at that time. I wasn't dismissive, but my thoughts were dismissive. I want to clarify that. And then later on at the end of the day, I was working with a coworker her name was Catherine. And I was like, oh, you wouldn't believe what Justin showed me today. He said that he was drawing a picture of this mannequin with a Spider-Man costume. And she's like, well, that's exactly what he did. And I'm like, what? No, he didn't. It's just a Spider-Man. She's like, no, you didn't see the 5 other drawings he drew of first the mannequin, then the mannequin partially dressed, then the mannequin with the Spider-Man thing almost all the way on. You just saw the last picture. And I was like, oh my gosh. So what I did was I wrote down the interaction, and then on the backside, I wrote down our conversation with me and the coworker, and just kind of showed how silly I was about judging this child. Yeah.
It definitely changed your way of documenting from then forward.
Right. I mean, moving forward, this child, Justin, we'll call him, was part of this Zombie World project, which, eventually got published and was in the Power of Emergent Curriculum somewhere around here. Oh, look at that. We have it over here. Power of Emergent Curriculum. It's the last chapter in there. And I'm a co-author on that. Anyway, it was a very interesting project where the children were responding to a homework assignment. And in the drawings was a lot of violence and guns and war and silly things like that. And people thought it was ridiculous, but I could just see the collaboration because these 2 boys, Justin and Matthew, were at the table together, and they each drew a picture, but then they taped it together, and then it connected, it fused the art together.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, this is something interesting. So I started taking pictures. Anyway, it turned into this amazing thing.
Yeah.
And it only happened because I had, like, I started documenting that because I had, first of all, completely interrogated a child about their art, which is terrible. Then dismissed a child's art, which is terrible. And now finally my eyes were open and ready to like see the art for what it was, an expression of their lived experience and kind of their way of dealing with whatever it was they were dealing with.
And the other thing too, where Matthew kept documenting all of that all along, because they were school age, they're seeing these things being posted and they can read. So they're reading Matthew's inner thoughts, but they're for the children. And they started documenting their own. I mean, they started taking these large pieces of paper and taping them to the wall, and they started documenting their own process.
I always forget that part of the story.
I know, always.
Every time I tell this story, I forget the part where the children documented their own work.
Yeah, because you've built that culture of documenting, and they could read it and say, Matthew, it doesn't actually say that. That's not what I said.
Oh my God, they're so critical when you misquote them by anyway, good times. So one last thing I wanted to talk about with documentation is my favorite form of documentation, which is the portfolio. So since working at Peter Green Hall, I learned how to make kind of a compilation of documentation over a child's existence, and we call it a portfolio.
Yeah. And, or it's a time period with you and that child.
Yeah. The great thing about a portfolio is it's so, the most difficult thing for a parent entering a daycare or childcare is to give away their time with their child. They're giving away those special moments to a stranger, essentially, and paying for that. And what the documentation I find in a portfolio is it gives some of that back. It gives the parents the stories of the children's learning and play and thinking and relationships that they couldn't be there for because they had to go to work or had to go to school or whatever it was they had to do. And it just gives that back to them. It's such a gift, I find. It's got examples of their work, their conversations, their ideas developing, their art.
Social interactions.
Their social interactions, the places they've gone, the places they got their information from, things like that.
And you yourself will come up with a formula on how that will look. Again, I'm so used to an aesthetic of the way to document it and the way to put a portfolio together. But really you're trying to find what works for you that you can keep it going. Yeah,
to a certain extent. I work at a school board now.
Yes.
And they say, a portfolio is whatever you want it to be. So just make a portfolio, whatever you want to be. No, that does not help people. That doesn't help people who are just starting.
Well, yeah, but I don't think the intent is that. I think the intent is that you can make it your own, but there's something missing if you don't know how to do it, right, or you're afraid or something like that.
Yeah, well, you can make a house your own too, but if you don't know what a house looks like, you've got nowhere to start from. You've got to start from an example. You know what I mean? And I find that some people are like, a portfolio can be whatever you want it to be and just explore and try. No, you need to see an example first. You need to see some sort of starting point.
I could see it that way. If you are somebody who is interested in photography, maybe you would document the child's experience through photography. And then the portfolio might be that way.
Sure.
And something that you're interested in and passionate about and doing.
Sure. If you don't have an example that's in the field of early childhood, sure, start with photography. Yeah. But why not start with an example that's in early childhood? You could also start in an example of a resume, because a resume can be a work portfolio as well.
Right.
But, I feel like you should really go out and find a good resource for a starting point. Something that you like.
Yes.
Try it out. Change it a little. Try.
Try is the biggest thing.
Yeah.
People do scrapbooking.
Yeah.
So you can take elements of that and bring it into your portfolio making process.
Absolutely. Although I hate when people turn a portfolio into a purely scrapbook, but
Right.
I understand how that could be kind of an entry point. Or even, I mean, maybe that's just who you are and what you think, what you find most interesting about portfolios is the scrapbook aspect, and good for you, and do it. But
But I think the end of the day, when you try to put a portfolio together, what is your intent? What is your message by creating this document? Or
yeah, and my intent
yeah,
is to document the journey, document the life, write down the script and the TV show of this child's life, capture what has happened to them so that in 20 years, when they have kids and they can start looking at, you know, why is my kid writing the alphabet backwards?
Yeah.
What is wrong with them? And they can look, oh, I did that too. I wrote the alphabet backwards, you know, and then you kind of realize that even if you're not in the field, you can use it kind of as a perspective for when you're parenting in the future, or just to reflect on for yourself anyway.
and that kind of leads into the form, because I really like where you can hold it in your hand. But nowadays we're moving through a technology world, so documentation now can be online.
Some people like to do an online portfolio. I just don't like it. I like the idea, but I also like books. Like, I like to sit with a book in my hand, open it up, look at the
Feel the
pages,
smell.
that awful smell of the glue. I like all of that. I like sharing it. Like,
Yeah.
oh, look at this together. You know what I mean? You don't get that same moment. You can't sit on your parents' lap and at a computer screen at the same time. It's just less awkward.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you can with a tablet, but it's just not the same thing. To me, I'm old. So some people are younger and love social media. Oh my God, the sun is too much. Anyway, that's all we have time for today, since the sun is now getting in our eyes and we're disappearing from the screen.
And we could continue talking all the time.
Yeah,
But we have a limited time.
we do have a limited time. We don't want to take up all your time.
So please leave us a comment and we'll definitely try to answer it.
Oh, we'll answer your questions if you want to talk more about something in the comments section. We'll definitely do that. Yeah, keep watching.
Like, favorite, and subscribe.
All right, see ya.
See ya!
Hey, Editor Mike here. Just before this video ends, make sure to go over to my channel, top link in the description, and subscribe. Also subscribe to the Worldwide Workshop for more weekly videos. Both are free and help out a lot. Thanks, and see you guys in the next video. Peace.